Parsons had expanded and had merged with the New School in New York, and they added fine arts programs. It had been specialized design programs. Really, it was a top-notch school, but it was so small, it was always struggling financially. So I had enrolled in the BFA program, which, because I was a Parsons graduate, they gave me 10 years to complete it. I feel like I had this sort of layered education, the design background, which was extraordinary, and then what I was learning about folk art through my job and the world that opened to me, a lot of which was textiles and things like that, which I already had some study of the history of. And then fine arts, which was a lot of I had wanted to make up a lot of the art history that I hadn't gotten in the previous courses. The studio classes were pretty new, so it was very much do it yourself. It was kind of like I was sort of picking and choosing. But finally I was able to look back at the design technical skills without a sense of just total rejection, which I had now about 5 years past. And I started using cloth, and basically I was making things that looked kind of like clothes if you put them on the wall. Like if you put them on the wall and it had the silhouette of someone in a dress, but you couldn't actually get into it. It wasn't a real piece of clothing. And so they started to become sort of figures and personas. And it just started to develop more three-dimensional. I was really building it. In the building of it, there's only a certain point where cloth can go if you're trying to make it three-dimensional, no matter how much junk you pour into it, to try and get it to stand up. And suddenly a friend of mine said, and I was working with wax, I was trying to saturate the cloth with wax to really model a figure. And a friend of mine said, you could just take this to a foundry, and just the way it is, I bet they could cast it because it's lost wax, over cotton or wool. And I went to a foundry, and they said, yeah, I'll help you. You just have to make it a little thicker. As long as it's not a synthetic fiber, and it will burn to ash, we can just burn the whole thing out. You'll lose your original, we'll have a casting. I was teaching at that time already, too, and I taught a class at the Met. It was called The History of the Structure of Clothing. And it was a graduate program through NYU, co-sponsored by the Costume Institute. And because I didn't have enough of a reputation as an artist yet to get a job teaching art. One day I was doing a lecture on armor. The armor for the Crusades is really the beginning of the whole development of three-dimensional costume. The technology of how it's made is based on cloth. It's all about just giving enough room that you can, like, if you know what a gusset is, it's like a little square patch you put in the underarm of a garment to make so it can move without tearing. It became costume that we think of when you think about corsetry and all that. It all developed out of the visual presence and the knowledge of armor, and also the fact that they were using metal in they would sew pieces of metal in to hold a shape. I was preparing this lecture and I was looking at these pictures, and they had etchings of a piece of armor found in the sands in the Middle East from the Crusades, just a fragment. And I started thinking, my God, this looks like my work. So suddenly I felt like a link to a history, because it wasn't like making bronze sculpture like French, because I wasn't starting with clay modeling and, and then doing all the removal processes of molding, and so on. But it was there. It was like a whole other kind of history. And so the first ones I made, I did cast iron because of the Crusades. And once I started casting, it just was, then I could make full figures. Then it just evolved really quickly.